The elementary years were also those in which my brother's friendship with Filippo was consummated, and a contemporary, Filippo, had the same age of Pietro, whom and Pietro met him because he was his class neighbor, because he went in the same school of Filippo. Filippo lived in the same street as ours, which, needless to say, was also the one where the school building was located. Over time, my family and I also learned to know his family. He was a child with an undoubtedly lower standard of living than ours, the last child of three and residing in a sort of house inherited from the grandmother who lived with them. Several times, together with the entire neighborhood, he would witness the scenes of verbal and physical violence that Filippo's two older brothers inflicted on their poor mother. Insults and offenses shouted without any regard, tears and threats, audible even at the other end of the street, made my shocked mother murmur phrases such as, "Certainly such shameful things will never happen under my roof." Filippo's was certainly an unhappy family unit. The family of Filippo was happy, and he was one of these worthy representatives. Although not exactly a remarkable friendship, it was my own parents in unsuspecting times. It was my it were my parents that who recommended me to go out with Pietro to play at his new friend's house. Filippo differed greatly from the classmates I was used to. He never stayed home for more than half an hour. He spent most of the afternoons in the street. He did disdain small acts of hooliganism. He was often violent even with me and my brother. He loved to give himself airs of a criminal and neighborhood bully. I still cannot say with precision what it was in that figure of a skinny, full-mouthed and ugly thug that aroused so much attraction in me. Perhaps he was so different from me then that I was fascinated by the idea of imagining a life quite different from the one I considered myself destined for. Even Pietro, after all, had entered that strange spell of anomalous friendship long before me. He was my brother. He shared the same problematic parents with me, and probably his personality was also so not too solid, lending itself to being easily plagiarized by someone physically stronger than him. It isn't that Filippo was much more sure of himself than the two of us. Characteristics of psychosis very rare in an 8-year-old boy who was about 10 when I first met him, were evident in him. His insecurity went to the point that he was terrified that Pietro and I, his only two real friends, could abandon him. Every day he forced us to go to his house. He was irritated to the point of hysterics if I put a study before his company, and even when he had to go to the bathroom, he forced us to stand in front of him to keep an eye on us. Often, Around the town there were other neighborhood bullies who flanked the Goliath figure of a little hooligan. Filippo enjoyed ordering us the most humiliating acts to laugh with the others, and give himself the air of a boss. Soon I began to perform almost without thinking, even knowing that I could break those chains when I wanted to. I certainly didn't let myself be frightened by unworkable threats when I returned to safety within the walls of my home. I was also attracted by the atmosphere of freedom, wildness, complicity, which tied me to a personality that was all in all respected and known, for better or for worse, throughout the neighborhood. There they were years, those were years of about 2.5 years, I think, no more. Um, there were there were years of absolute originality in life, spent mostly between books and studies until late at night. With Pietro and Filippo, we often went to explore the most wild and less frequented places of our Vesuvian village. Just beyond our house lay the former baronial lands, now rented agricultural estates, belonging to an ancient, rich and noble landowner. For us that was a fairy tale forest, filled with a thousand imaginary battles against armies of citrus groves and dumpsters, and also the clearing of at the gates of the castle made of old, now dilapidated, prefabricated buildings. It was not really an uncontaminated nature, as we call it memory. The land was mostly barren and littered with rubbish. The older boys pawned magazines, bounded, and used condoms that hinted at a metamorphosis of those lonely places as soon as darkness fell. It was mostly my fantasy that managed to transfigure everything, even in a evil world. Never admitted it. Filippo was also fascinated by it. For him and my brother, I invented adventures games acting against imaginary backgrounds of famous fantastic books, treasure hunts that soon won over other kids in the neighborhood as well, with the latter, the violent and arrogant nature of our friend was mostly manifested. Usually, however, we were alone, the three of us, because the others also snubbed Filippo and his reputation as a criminal. I felt very uncomfortable when seeing us pass by on the street, the older idlers looking out of the windows mistaking me for the leader of that little band. It was true that I was the tallest and that therefore I could give the impression of commanding a clique of no-nonsense, yet everyone would have been shocked if I had seen me bow my head to the slightest imposition of a brand, malignant brand, capable of crushing me in the palm of, of a man like him. Well, I think Filippo had his problems, but uh, it is also true that he was a very lonely child. Thanks to Filippo, I discovered hidden wonders of our apparently so small and anonymous village, little town. I felt the thrill of finding hidden alleys and lanes, of entering the school out of dream in the evening, of being chased by some near-me landowner who mistook us for fruit or carrot thieves. We often had a snack based on walnuts and hazelnuts gathered in some mysterious well-kept grove, with a ground covered with crumpled leaves of small mushrooms, perhaps tasty, perhaps poisonous and fairy. There were times when I came home dirty, tired, but also with a great desire, especially in summer, to arrive early the next day for another fantastic exploration. Ah, there were older times, ancient times, lost forever. Well, for today it's all, and I think we will see again next week. Um, Thank you for listening to me.